Welcome to the latest in our Blue Deal debates, where we discuss our seas, our fishing industry and the marine environment. I'm Chris Davies. I'm a former chair of the European Parliament's Fisheries Committee and now a senior advisor to Rud Pedersen Public Affairs in Brussels. And thanks very much to the team at Rud Pedersen for making this webinar happen, organising it and sponsoring it. Now I have a special guest, and he can lay claim to being the single most influential individual in Europe when it comes to setting our policy for fisheries and the marine environment. He is Virginijus Sinkevičius, the European Commissioner for Oceans, the Environment and Fisheries. Thank you very much, Commissioner, for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me.
I'm thinking back 2.5 years, and 2.5 years ago I was co-chairing the hearing for your Commission appointment. You faced 100 MEPs, a number of whom were going to ask questions about the environment and others about fisheries. Now, not many people have come into politics thinking about fish. Did you have to do a lot of homework for that interview?
No, absolutely. And I'm very thankful, of course, to both DGs, DG Environment and DG Mare, to really helping me to prepare, because, you know, my background was I was a Minister of Economy. So probably the biggest, let's say, overlap with fisheries was understanding from sort of the part of the economic activities, but definitely, you know, going deep into CFP, what I was extremely interested in how it really operates, it really operates, and how we can improve. I looked at the possibilities of work ahead and etc. So no, it's been a very interesting journey before the hearings, but I think it's became even more interesting after the hearings. Even so that, you know, if at those hearings you would ask me, would you give me a blank page and I would write you a sort of a scenario how those 5 years would look like. Unfortunately, it would be not completely, but a very much different from what we are facing now with the pandemics, with war. It's
okay. Well, you faced 100 MEPs, and they said, "Yeah, we want you." Here we are now, about halfway through your mandate, your 5-year mandate. What do you think? What have you achieved, and have you been bogged down by frustrations and how difficult it is to actually get decisions made?
It is quite a task, but I'm happy we managed to really progress a lot. First of all, what I'm happy about that we managed Brexit. It wasn't an easy task. I remember myself being stuck in this building with UK counterparts negotiating the numbers until the Christmas day. And if you remember, the press conferences which supposed to happen were postponed by the leaders because we were negotiating fisheries. So it was by far the most difficult part, and for me to hold, let's say, on one hand, you know, we are close to a deal, but on the other hand, I know that the fisheries community here in Europe have to find a deal which would be balanced, ensuring that, you know, we all knew that there will be a price to pay for us and for fisheries community, but it's divided equally, that no one really feels that they paid more than the others. But also ensuring that they have access to waters and etc. So that was extremely difficult. But what's more even difficult is later on to, let's say, build that relations and ensure that what we have agreed is implemented.
I'll touch on that a bit. As you know, I'm no fan of Brexit. Put it mildly. And the seas,
that's why I
the seas, of course, are you know, well, whatever you do with political boundaries, you know, the seas, the fish pay no respect to political boundaries. So, you know, when it comes to it, it's disturbing that you've had to spend so much time on this rather than on the, you know, building up fish stocks, for example.
Absolutely, implementation of CFP. But again, on fish stocks, then I think, you know, we managed to achieve great results on with our Baltic Declaration, which become a important part going ahead with the Helcom agreement and getting, you know, Baltic Sea ministers, especially those responsible for agriculture and fisheries, committing to certain goals on reduction of pollution, on sustainable fisheries was very important. And I think if you look at acts and quotas, which we've set in past 2 years in the Baltic Sea, they've been according to scientific advice, which is very important. The bycatch we managed to decrease.
Can I just say,
yeah.
Although you're saying that, I mean, I remember, and we are, the state of the Baltic, of course, has been a concern, not simply because of overfishing, but because of pollution of the waters.
Absolutely.
But I remember just 2 years ago, we were introducing controls on fishing, and now more controls have been introduced. So you do wonder whether it's yet another case of a bit too little, too late. Governments are always trying to not bite the bullet and take the measures that have to be done if the situation is to be turned around.
You know very well how the policies are made, and this is what I'm trying to always remind. At the moment when we get into the room and speak about crisis, that's too late. And in fisheries, especially when we have this excellent scientific advice, yes, always it can be improved and so on, but when we have this excellent scientific advice, I think we need to take that into to account, and that would also give a clarity to fisheries community. When do we expect for certain stocks to recover? What kind of profitability fisheries would have, fishers would have this year, and so on. If we see that balance between the social and economic issues is not in place, then we can look for additional measures to help the community. But unfortunately, that's not always the case.
Do you think
very often everyone tries to reap those political benefits right here, right now? And with ecosystems, with fisheries, we know that it's not the case, and usually right here, right now means that you also cutting the fundament, the very base of that profitable future.
Okay, we have to come back to this because it's such a big issue. But on this issue of the scientific evidence, do the ministers gather around tables now when the tax is set each December, the total allowable catches? I mean, are they? And often they're agriculture ministers, aren't they, who just put on the fisheries hat for that one meeting a year? Do they respect the scientific advice now?
I would say yes, and anyway, the debate always starts and really is around the scientific advice. It's always, I would say when we have solid scientific advice, there is way less debates. Ministers usually agree on that, and they know where are the red lines. When, let's say, scientific advice is quite broad in its interpretation, then everyone aims for not the lower level, but for a higher level, and that's where discussion starts. And when it's only precautionary advice, then it's the most difficult part.
I got interested in the fisheries issues back in, I think, the 1990s, for no particular reason, because I didn't represent a fisheries area, except that I kept reading newspaper reports about overfishing and about just too much competition, and we would just seem to be fishing our seas out, and this made no sense to me. Now, where are we now, do you think? What's your assessment of the state of stocks?
I think we improved a lot comparing to 30 years. Implementation of CFP policies really brought us in lines of scientific advice. If you look at the North Sea, Skagerrak and Kattegat, Baltics, yes, some stocks are not doing well, but we also should not forget that there are other factors, which I hope that we will touch upon in our CFP review later in the mandate. It's actually coming, but we've managed to improve a lot. Where we have issues is, of course, Mediterranean.
Yeah.
We still have to do a lot of work. It's heavily overfished, and its decision making is not easy there. Due to many reasons. One thing is, of course, that it's a shared sea basin, and of course, then when compliance is not equal by all stakeholders, it's very difficult to convince our fishermen about level playing field and so on, and ensuring that. There is a huge task and a lot of work still ahead.
Can I ask a specific question then? I think even the environmental NGOs admit that things are better. They can't not, because the scientific evidence is that in the Northeast Atlantic waters around Europe, the biomass, there's more fish in the sea.
Yeah.
Simple as that. But the Commission quite often comes out with a statement that 99% of the fish we buy in our shops is being fished sustainably. And yet the scientific committee, Steph, comes out and says 40% of the fish are being overfished. And I just don't know how you reconcile these.
I think
it's
first of all that we are a little bit speaking about different numbers, and I think that's what's very important to make a difference between that. But what Commission is usually speaking is about those where we have scientific advice, and we speaking about the specific sea basin and not overall. So there is still, despite these theses, there is still a lot of work to do, not a 1%. There is still a lot of work to do in improving scientific advice, improving our decision making, ensuring controls of implementation.
Well, on the scientific advice, we've been calling for a long time and saying a lot of stocks are not being properly assessed, and we need to increase this. Are we increasing it? Are we doing more measurement? So, because the situation doesn't seem to change very much.
Yeah, that's true, and I think one thing where we need a member states agreement also on those stocks to be assessed. So of course some stocks are assessed very well, and we have a very good and precise scientific advice. On some we still need to do more work. Most importantly, that I always say, priorities are where the money is, and we really do have a solid line to be spent on improving of scientific advice. Of course, not everything in science is not everything so easy, and it cannot be done just because you have a bit of a more in your budget. There still has to be work to be done, but I hope that we can move forward, and for example in Mediterranean Sea we can assess more stocks, so that would give us of course a better overview and a better understanding, because as I said, in the end of the day, to be honest, the famous December Council, we pass through the questions where we have a solid scientific advice way faster, because ministers, they also respect the scientific advice, where, as you said, there is no clearance, then we usually get stuck in finding the margin.
Let me bait you here. Okay, there's a lot of things here we need to be doing, and we can agree on that. Are we actually doing it? Are we actually
absolutely, yes,
getting to grips with these issues and increasing the scientific advice, and therefore having these, for example, all these non-quota species? I think lots and lots of different species grouped under this heading of non-quota, where there's a sort of I don't know, there seems to be a free-for-all, really. There's no measurement of the catches that are being made, and there's a lot of concern about it.
This is one of the areas where we still need an improvement. I mean, again, I think we're moving forward. If you evaluate, you would definitely see the progress and that we're moving ahead. Is the speed with which we're moving fast enough? Not sure. I think we could improve, but of course, it's not only the Commission; it's also a member states, especially those the coastal member states. Important, of course, I think to have a dialogue with the communities as well, because we see that it's way harder to implement our policies where communities are not accepting them well. And therefore there is a lot of work still has to be done with the communities. I myself spent, past year when COVID was, let's say, better off, traveling to different regions, speaking with the communities, asking them what issues do they see, how we can improve to ensure that there is no sort of opinion that Brussels is imposing some crazy rules and we cannot do our business as usual. And I'm always trying to take that into account if there is a relevant how to say, suggestions.
Well, there's communities, but there's also the vested interests. On the one hand, you could say the environmental NGOs are vested interests, and they're always going to be criticising you and saying you should be doing more. and then you've got the fishing industry.
Yeah.
Now, I've got a lot, obviously, without the fishing industry, we don't get any fish on our tables, so we owe them a lot. But my impression over the years has always been that the fishing industry takes a very short-term look at things. When it comes to rebuilding stocks, for example, rebuilding stocks requires you to hold back the effort when it comes to fishing, and fishermen like to catch fish, as many fish as they possibly can.
That's probably the nature of business itself, no? And it's an economic activity first of all, and those people, they make living out of it. But I think what's very important, it's also our job then to strike that balance, to find that balance, because on one hand we have also NGOs who, as you said, would say that it's not enough and we should be even more ambitious. Then we have the fisheries community who say that we are too ambitious, we're listening only to NGOs and we should stop doing that, and so on. So it's our work to actually have this solid scientific advice which guides our decision making. Then of course evaluate situation on the ground, what's realistic to implement, what socio-economic impact certain measures are going to have, and then propose it. Of course, we still need an agreement from council, from ministers. It's not only that the commission proposal is flying, but I think this is our job to strike that uneasy balance.
In fact, if you don't mind, I think I'll join with you. Just what's your ambition on this? I tell you my ambition. I mean, I look at the stocks, and the stocks are in a better state in the Atlantic waters than they've been. We'll touch on the Mediterranean perhaps a bit again, because it's complicated. Stocks are better, and I'm happy to defend the European Union's policies to critics because of that. But they're still nothing like what they were. The abundance of the seas have been eroded over the last 100 years. I had this idea that, would it be possible to really rebuild the stock so you could walk on the cod or whatever, as people said you used to be able to do. And then you could have less fishing effort and still have lots more fish. But I don't even know if that's realistic. But what's your ambition?
I think that's realistic, and this is where we're going. One thing, my ambition is, of course, is ensure that we properly implement policy. First of all, that we manage to not only, let's say, rely on old control, which is waiting at the ports usually and so on, but we also ensure the implementation of our policies on the sea, that activities are according to our policies, and of course that we manage to do it within the planetary boundaries in a sustainable way, which leads to recovery of the stocks and closer to your dream. But what's most important, I really want to achieve that the communities, that the business, fishers, they would also accept that yes, there are difficult years where some stocks are not doing well, but if we will plan our business long term, profitability, way higher profitability.
Yeah, the profitability of the fishing industry, I don't know about the obviously current situation notwithstanding, until the last year or two anyway, it's been looking very good.
Exactly. So it's going to be there, and we have to ensure it. So that's one, and the third one, I would say that if that understanding will come closer, I also think that would really very much contribute to young people attraction to sector, because of course it's a very specific sector. It's dangerous. It's not like sitting in the office every morning and etc. Going out there in the sea, you have to have passion for it. But most importantly, I think you also have to ensure stability. So that business can be planned, that those young people getting involved into sector, they can have a stable income, and that's only possible when you said that without fishery sector we wouldn't have this great fish on our table. I agree, but in the end of the day, I also want to say that sector is important, but sector and also all the other ecosystems are first of all based on fish stocks. So if we're going to have a healthy fish stocks, we can have a healthy fishery sector. If stocks are declining, if they're not in a good shape, and I'm not speaking only about the number of fishes in the sea, but also their size and etc. Then we won't be able to have a healthy sector, healthy coastal communities, and we will be forced to solve not only ecological issues and sustainability issues, but also socio-economic.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with anything you've said, and of course, with your other hat on, you could also point out the arguments that declining fish stocks are bad for climate change and clearly bad for the marine environment. And if we're to reverse some of the negative trends, then we need to rebuild the fish stocks. Let me just take a quick change of scene here. I'm very conscious that you are the youngest commissioner here. And 10 years ago, you were at university in Aberystwyth in Wales, playing basketball, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
On the basketball team. I haven't got the height for that.
Me too, but I always punch above the weight.
6 years later, you're Minister for the Economy in Lithuania, in your home country. And 2 years after that, you were European Commissioner. What did you feel like when your Prime Minister said at the time, I'm going to nominate you as a Commissioner?
That's hard to say. I think I felt that I can do it probably. This is the task that I can handle. I always, when I come into a different positions, I try to have a vision which I want to accomplish, and probably one thing is the Prime Minister's nomination, but I think what was most important is my arrival to Brussels and first meeting with President von der Leyen, where she already introduced her view and portfolio, which I'm going to have to lead. And this is where, straight away I started to think, wow, that's quite a shift. From Ministry of Economy and Innovation to Environment, Oceans and Fisheries. But now when I look 2.5 years back, I'm really happy about this choice and about this very meaningful portfolio, because in the end of the day, working for the future of our planet, it's immense and very hard task, but it's extremely rewarding.
Well, there's the issue, because you are not simply the Fishery and Oceans Commissioner, you're also the Environment Commissioner. I mean, how does the workload spread out? Because I would have thought, frankly, that environment would chemical, there's so many issues, would dominate.
And that's probably true. I would be lying if I would say to you that environment is not dominating, because of course there is a lot of question. The good thing that they overlap, because again, when we speak about the ecosystem's health, we also speak about our sea basins, about our oceans, and that's inevitably have an impact on fisheries. That's why I want, with the CFP review, have a very clear linkage with climate change and how that affects fisheries, because we know that the issues with cod in Baltic Sea, for example, in the north is not so much actually overfishing as much as it's due to climate change, where we see the migration of fish change and that the fish moved actually up north where the water is cooler. So I think it's very important to have these two portfolios together. Even sometimes it's difficult choices when you have economic activity standing in front of the let's say those environmental policies. But on the other hand, when you are able to see both sides and have this overview, that makes you to take best decision.
I just wonder, because frankly, of course, you're going to defend the position of these things, and there are synergies. I recognise that, but I also worked with Commissioner Damanaki when she introduced the Common Fisheries Policy, and then she was solely the Fisheries Commissioner. Yeah. And it's not simply the European issues, isn't it? It's the whole global governance matter. So there's enough work there for a commissioner in their own right, is there not? I mean, I just wondered what your recommendation might be to your successor.
It is of course enough, but now it's very hard to unbundle, because as I said, on the other hand, I'm very happy, because it gives me an opportunity, a better outreach to community, because in our biodiversity strategy we have plenty of decisions which going to touch upon the fisheries community, and that gives me a really good understanding and also open channels to the community, discuss that with them, because it also touches a lot on agricultural activities, for example, but I have way less of an outreach naturally because I just don't interact as much as I do with fisheries community. Yes, I speak, of course, with Copa Cogeca in a big meeting and so on, but it's not as close as, for example, myself going, to the Mediterranean sea coast, going to the North Sea, up to north of France, and speaking directly with fishermen, asking how they feel about our work and policy. So you see, it's on one hand, I absolutely agree. There is plenty of work, especially with Brexit and implementation and of our international agreements, ocean governance as well. So absolutely. But it also has its advantages, and a biggest advantage that you can be close to community, and you have that extra chance of explaining your policies, because I think without doing that, then you get so much sort of pushback that it's very hard to convince then local ministers that we need this and that, and you always need at least understanding. I don't say it's sometimes impossible to reach, full support of the community, but at least understanding of what you're doing and what's your vision.
But do you meet, by the way, the fishing industry spokesman? I mean, Europesh people, or indeed the environmental NGOs collectively? Do you have regular meetings with these people?
Of course, I have regular meetings with blue NGOs, with the environment NGOs. Where we discuss, different issues and policies. Fisheries sector as well. Usually I try, when I go to member states, also go there to the sea coast and meet with not only, let's say, representative, because he represents a large number, but also with local fishermen, with small scale, with owner of a trawler, who could tell me a bit of their part of the story. But yeah, when we have, for example, now a very hard discussions on fuel prices, I asked for a very urgent call on Monday, where I invited all. We had NGOs representative, we had scientists at the table, and also.
Well, I must touch upon that since you raised it. Okay, yeah. So the pressure at the moment has been to try and reduce fishing subsidies. And I don't know what progress perhaps you could say what progress you were making on that score, and then to what extent the current, the new situation is going to bring about change, we detrimental change.
Exactly, we have very clear mandate in WTO, and this current situation does not make our life easier. But this is what I try to speak, that we need to look for solutions which. One thing crucial, that is not jeopardizing our mandate in WTO. Secondly, that we don't subsidize fossil fuels, because it's completely against our Green Deal policies. So within that, what can we do? This was the main sort of, let's say, message when I met with the community, but also with NGOs and scientists to hear a little bit of their views. But I said the framework, the boundaries of which we cannot, cross are very clear, and I just want to warn you before we start our exchange.
So, with fuel prices going up, or compared to recent years, I mean, the pressure is obviously going to be on from fishermen saying, no, you've got to keep. Apart from anything else, European fishermen are going to be saying, but other governments are doing it. We're being disadvantaged. Are you holding the line here?
I'm happy when other governments' decisions were working out, but we have to be careful. Not everything you see abroad can be, copy pasted and applied here. We have, our own cultural heritage, understanding. Sea basins are different, and so on. I get a lot of questions like this and that worked in the USA. Why are you not applying this? Look at our sea coast and look at their sea coast, and then tell me if that would work. So there are plenty of differences. Now we of course will look for different solutions, possibilities of maybe state aid. temporization, that's definitely not off the table, because again, if profitability is not there, why would you go out to the sea? But I don't want to go now a lot into detail, because we're still looking at those tools, and next week on Monday we're going to have exchange with the ministers, and after all these sort of opinions, when I collect them, I will try to work it out with my team what could be the best solution.
Okay.
So
I understand. It's a changing situation.
Absolutely.
Just touch on Brexit, which you raised. I'm not going to spend much time on it, but I was rather struck, if anything, when the December total allowable catch agreement came out. I mean, I think we share 60 stock. European Union and Britain says 60 stocks or something, 63. It seemed remarkably amicable. I mean, here's an agreement. That's
already two agreements.
Maybe that means the difficulties are behind us now. Because I remember the Brits used to argue, British fishermen used to argue that we'll have the right to bring about change every year, look like Norway, and yet your colleagues in the Commission used to tell me, but actually we have great stability with Norway. We have a very
exactly.
It's all calm and peaceful. We make agreements each year, and the boat is not often rocked.
Exactly.
That may be the case now with the UK.
I think
you don't seem so sure.
No. It's always negotiations, and I would be not saying true if I would say that they are easy and we just meet, looking into our eyes and shake our hands. No, of course it takes time, and we go through the details, and it requires certain political decisions to be made, and I constantly have calls with my counterpart. But I'm really happy with what we managed to achieve, because, as I said, Brexit fisheries part of Brexit was the most difficult part actually to finalize agreement. But we were actually the ones to move ahead the fastest out of then looking with the implementation. So it's the second agreement that we managed to reach. We agreed on tax and quotas last year as well. After the Brexit, wasn't easy, but that was, I think, the most crucial, because it gave us a perspective that we can agree and we don't leave those uncharted waters, and that we have a clear rules. So this year was not easy, but it was achieved even faster. I think it's still our relations is still sort of building up. We still it was a lot of let's say tough conversations regarding the licenses, regarding the access to waters, and that inevitably doesn't make it easier. But I hope that we building up that relation, in, let's say, mutually respecting each other, and it's improving more and more. I'm very thankful to technical people on UK side, on our side, who do immense job.
But I read the British fishing press, fishing news, and the cry ever since Brexit took place has been, we've been betrayed. They're not actually pointing to the European Commission, they're pointing to their own government and saying, we were promised lots more. And we haven't got a bigger share of the quota, and we haven't got this, and we haven't got that. And now some of them are looking to 2026 and renegotiation, and will insist on getting a bigger share of the cake. But then I looked at the European Parliament's Fisheries Committee resolution of a couple of weeks ago, and there's no sign of movement there at all. They're not. They want, if anything, they want to resist. They want some of the quota back rather than to surrender anymore. I don't see the European Union being willing to bring about much change in 2026. I think it would like the current arrangements to continue. Am I wrong?
I think they're working well, but again, 2026 is not so much about quota as much as about access to waters. So I think what's very important overall about.
Do you mean the 6 to 12 mile limit?
Or? Yes, and so on. So territorial waters as well.
Okay.
So, but what's very important, I think, overall speaking about Brexit and expectations, what's worst, I think, when people are given false promises, and then they build those castles, and that's not what actually happens afterwards. So I think, and I always encourage, I think there is a hard truth, but that has to be spoken. When I went and I was meeting our communities, who are going to be affected by Brexit, I told them straight away, there is no chance we can keep status quo. I wish I could do that, but that's impossible. There will be a price that we'll have to pay, and fisheries.
You're talking here about communities within the European Union.
Yes, and there will be fisheries will be the sector which will be affected, and the worst probably that there will be a lot of, let's say, chaos and misunderstandings at the beginning. And what I can promise that we will work around the clock to ensure a stability for you, and I think that's what's very important overall looking. And I would say that 2026 would do best if that would be also about stability rather than shaking a boat, and then for some having, let's say, those promises undelivered or being postponed again to some other date.
Okay. Let me turn to marine protected areas. Looking after our seas, protecting our marine environment, the goal of having 30% of the world's seas protected. But I've heard you say, paper protect. I want proper protection, not paper protection.
Yeah.
I think that was the line. And I still don't see where the proper protection is coming. I see declarations that we're going to do this and that, but even the French president, even President Macron, I think, was saying France is going to declare so much as protected, but the absolute protection is only going to increase from 2% to 4%. It seems a long way from the real ambitions that we should be seeking.
There is still a lot of work to be done, but I'm happy that we're moving forward. We're going to have soon our plan of marine protected resources, where we're going to look at some, let's say, even fishing gears and their use in marine protected areas. We're going to explore different possibilities. So I think the action plan which comes later this year will be that moment, let's say, about the real protection or a paper protection. In the end of the day, what's very important, of course, the role of implementation by member states, ensuring that really.
That's it, isn't it? I mean, this is the frustration for you, because you can get the declarations, but ultimately the enforcement of the rules is. I mean, the whole fisheries issue. It's an exclusive European competence. But the enforcement is entirely down to member states.
Absolutely.
And your control is minimal.
One thing, of course, we need to finalize our negotiations on control negotiations and ensure that we have a proper control. And I hope that. Do
you think this will happen? I mean, these negotiations have been that control regulation was first introduced in 2018, and you still haven't got an agreement.
I know.
I mean, it's not, but hardly your fault. But
I mean, we moved forward. That's already good step, and we're trying to find the common positions. Of course, there are sensitivities on Parliament side, there are sensitivities on Council side, but Commission is playing its role as an honest broker, finding an ambitious agreement which would be forward-looking. And what's very important to me personally, that we not taking any step back from the current regulation.
So on the marine protected areas, you think? This action plan, is this going to be legislation? Or, how binding is it going to be?
Yeah, so we seek to make it a legislation which would be implemented around the member states. Of course, again, it comes to designation of areas by member states and so on. But we have our Birds and Habitats Directive. We have certain rules on Natura 2000, which gives us a little bit of leverage to ensure implementation.
I suppose on that I should just pick up a question that was thrown at me when I spoke to someone who said, and I said I was having the opportunity to speak with you, and they said it's Article 11. Article 11 of the Common Fisheries Policy gives effectively the CFP precedent over some of the Natura 2000 environmental habitats protection legislation. And this delays some of the protections for the Dogger Bank, for example, in the North Sea, that environmentalists would say really should be a priority. I mean, is this the sort of thing that you wish to try and resolve when you review the CFP?
We're not going to most likely reopen CFP, so we need to find other ways to do it. Reopening of CFP, I don't think so that would be a good idea. You just refer to control regulation debate and so on. I believe that might end up not, let's say, with a proper ambition of CFP to be closed. So we need to find, and we are looking at the ways around it.
Okay. Can I just ask about some of the issues that I know you've raised in the past, or just express concerns about, because things like the mass washing up on the beaches around the Bay of Biscay of dolphins, issues of super trawlers, which really get the NGOs going, but on the other hand, others in the fishing industry would say, well, they're only big. These things are only big because they've got refrigerators on them. I just wondered, have you any thoughts on what we should be doing about the size of vessels, and indeed how we should be encouraging the smaller vessels, because the smaller fleet, which is said generally to cause less environmental harm, seems to get a very raw deal really out of fishing policy.
Again, on size of vessels, I'm not that much concerned as much about the capacity of the vessel, and again, ensuring, for example, that the same vessel would really implement legislation properly, such as landing obligation. If implementation is there, then probably, I wouldn't be so, let's say, nervous about it. What's very important, I think, now is one thing to find a way to help actually our fisheries community to go ahead with the Green Deal in terms of their engines. We need to find these solutions which would allow them to have more efficient, clean engines. And at the moment, those solutions require bit of a, let's say, larger vessel, which does make our tasks not easier. But what I think we have to ensure that the capacity of that vessel is not increasing. So
will this help the dolphins? I mean, have we identified the problem? What the cause of it is?
You asked about the vessel size. Now, when it comes to implementation of bycatches, especially at the Bay of Biscay. So, I had extensive work with member states, and they promised to have, sufficient plans which would decrease bycatch of dolphins in the Bay of Biscay, avoiding closures and so on. But at the moment, I don't really see that those plans that were proposed, and when we assess them, that they are strong enough. So we talking with member states, either improving those plans, or then we will have to take certain drastic measures to ensure that
you're not ruling out taking such measures.
Bycatch of dolphins are over.
Okay, interesting. I just wondered on this landing obligation that you touched upon there. You were not responsible for introducing the landing obligation. I mentioned Maria Damanaki. It was in her proposals. I was hugely enthusiastic about it because it just seems to me completely immoral to catch fish and throw them overboard, and that there was a lot of public sentiment. But here we are. It's supposed to be fully in place, and I don't think there's a single member state that seems to be enforcing it effectively. And because fishermen seem to be disregarding it, it's as though they can, if they can disregard one set of rules, they can disregard other sets of rules. I mean, I hate to say this, but despite the control regulation and possible use of cameras and things, maybe we simply have to accept that it's not going to happen. We can't control what fishermen do out at sea.
No, I mean, I don't think so. We have tried all tools, and you just mentioned yourself CCTV, and again, new control regulation has quite a plenty of measures to improve that control on the sea. And I don't want to give up yet. I think it's important. It's important, especially when we have such a sensitive species where bycatch limits are very low. So I think we should now finalize our negotiations on control regulation, and if we manage to have an ambitious agreement, that might help us stepping up the implementation of the landing obligation.
How do you get things done other than through legislation? I mean, you're the European Commissioner. I introduce you as the single most important individual when it comes to shaping policy. I can't think of another individual who is more important, so I think that stands. And yet, as an example, President Macron, I think, at the recent summit, the Ocean Summit, called for devices to be fitted to exclude turtles from being caught in shrimp fisheries, which apparently is already done in the USA. Okay, and you may say, well, yeah, we should be doing that. But other than, how can you actually, if an idea like that comes up and people say, yeah, we should do it, how do you do it? I mean, what legal instruments have you got to?
So first of all, if, for example, ideas like that are proposed, they have to be scientifically assessed if they are suitable for our seas, if they can be implemented on vessels, on fishing gears and etc. And if scientific assessment says that it will have a positive impact on one or the other species, that's absolutely the case. This is what's going on with dolphins bycatch, where pingers is sort of a solution, but unfortunately that does not bring a desired results, and we need to do more.
Well, again, but how do you do more? I mean, I don't know. Is it up to member states to introduce?
No. So of course, member states and especially RFMOs, regional organizations, they also meet and discuss and offer different solutions. But same goes from the scientific community, the sector, NGOs, and so on. I think this is quite an open work where we're ready to look for best possible solutions to certain issues.
I won't keep you much longer, but just let me explore a couple of issues. Take that one first of all. On these turtle exclusion devices, is this something automatically you'd say, okay, we need the scientific evidence, but sounds like an important thing to me?
No, it's if it's really reaches the goals, then absolutely fine. But we also need to ensure that we help fisheries community to, let's say, install those additional devices, purchase them, and so on. So we have to look through our MFAF now budget programs to let's say fund those sustainability solutions.
Okay. One of your most controversial remarks is about trawling. One of the most harmful systems ever, I think, for the marine environment. I think you said once, and indeed, I was reading an account of fishing off Scotland in the 19th century, where fishermen were complaining about these new trawlers that were coming in, and the fish stocks were disappearing as a result of it. And they weren't. That was under sail before even steam came in, let alone diesel. So people have been complaining about trawling for a long time, and yet it's the basis of a lot of the current fishing industry. I don't know. What are your views on this? I mean, what sort of controls should be introduced if they should be?
So one thing, of course, it makes decision making very difficult because it's the backbone of our fisheries, and I realize that very well. On the other hand, I think we should look at the fishing patterns. We should look at where fishery is going on, and I think after the scientific advice assessment, we should talk about the marine protected areas. is it the right place for bottom trawling to happen?
And I suppose that depends on the definition of the MPA, why that MPA has been declared.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. But at the moment, bottom trawling is happening in marine protected areas, and I think we need to look at possibilities to really, let's say, ensure that marine protected areas are not for bottom trawling.
Okay, finally, just let's look at some of the global issues. The RFMOs, Regional Fisheries Management Organizations,
Yes.
partnerships between countries who are involved in the fishing of our oceans. Now, the EU is active in many of them. I've been to a couple of these meetings. I know you've got negotiating teams here who I don't know. The word frustration again comes up because again, the UN Food and Agriculture Organization points out that almost all the world's seas are being fished at capacity, and a significant number are being overfished. And yet, in the RFMOs, trying to get agreement to bring about change is harder than pushing water uphill. And I just wonder, given the problem of overfishing that's been experienced in places like the Mediterranean, when will governments learn that you can't solve problems by just allowing the problem to continue occurring?
I think the understanding comes with carefully reading the scientific advice and then guiding your decision making based on this scientific advice. We rely a lot on RFMOs because again different countries come there with their positions, and then they look for that landing zone, which also, we cannot say that it was entirely negative. It brought some really positive results, common management plans, which I think worked out very well, and we see improvement. So I think there is still a lot of work to be done, and I share your frustration sometimes, but we need to look forward and keep on working.
Well, referring to the scientific advice, I was lobbied when I was chair of the Fisheries Committee about the state of yellowfin tuna in the Indian Ocean, which European vessels catches amongst others. And the scientific advice, I'm told now, is that we really should be cutting the scientific advice to the Indian Ocean RFMO says that we should be cutting the catch by 30% in order to conserve stocks, which some say are in danger of collapse. Is this something that the EU is likely to support? And how will you reach a decision on this?
No, so of course we know the importance of tuna, but again here when we talk about the ICAD, we are the ones really supporting the scientific advice.
Yeah, so in the Indian Ocean equivalent,
Yep.
You'd look to that scientific. If the Indian Ocean Committee's scientific people have actually said we really should be doing this, this is something you would expect the EU to be supporting.
EU is usually on. Of course, I need to look at this concrete question of yours, concrete issue. But EU is usually the one actually pushing the scientific advice to be fully implemented, and we really always advocate for the scientific advice implementation.
And do you feel, in the talks you have had, and obviously they're to a degree limited simply because of time pressures, in talks with other nations, like the Chinese, for example, they've got the biggest fishing fleet in the world. Sometimes you read, the Chinese fishing fleet has appeared off Africa and all the fish have disappeared, which doesn't help the locals, to put it mildly. Do they get it? Do they get it that fishermen, we need high seas control measures? We need the fishing effort has got to be controlled.
It's, one of the top priorities is for me is this year to reach the agreement on the protection of the high seas, so-called the BBNJ agreement. We had now the 5th round in Brest. We launched together with France a high ambition coalition where I called colleagues, ministers to join, and I hope that in August we're going to have the last 5th round where we manage to get that agreement. Is everyone getting it? I can tell you that our high ambition coalition does not have 150 or whatever countries. It's still we're probably short about 90 countries.
Okay.
So there is still a lot of work.
What about the fish
to be
producers, the companies that make money out of fishing and selling fishing and packaging fish and such like? I mean, you know, these in many cases are $billion enterprises, and they obviously got, you know, they're in the front line. Are we working with them closely enough to? I remember, for example, in 1996, I was in the British House of Commons, and that was when Unilever, who at the time had some fish labels, worked with WWF and set up the Marine Stewardship Council. And I remember the declaration. You know, Unilever is saying, we want to be able to supply our customers in 100 years' time. And the way things are going, frankly, with poor political decision making, that's not going to happen because we're not going to have the fish. So they did something to try and bring about change. And I just wondered whether other companies are recognizing that if they want to be supplying their customers in 100 years' time, they need to be part of the high ambition group.
Absolutely. No, so, you know, everyone along the chain is responsible. And I think when we talk about, you know, global decisions to be achieved, support from the public is very important. Not always it's there.
Okay. Well, final specific question, just on this business of how the consumer, how the ordinary person knows what they should be buying, because there were just so many conflicting labels on cans of fish and things. And I think the Commission has been looking at, the Commission has often explored over the years the possibility of a Commission eco label or something like that. The Marine Stewardship Council I mentioned, it's been going 25 years now. I think it's the world's leading certifying, but it still only certifies 14% of the world's fish. I would just wonder, if you're going down the road of eco labels, isn't there a risk that you'd never be able to demonstrate? There would be so much fraud and so many cheats that the whole reputation of the label would be dragged down. So,
you know, the work is yet to be done, but we already started the work on tracking and ensuring, you know, of fish where it's fished, and then, you know, proper labeling of it. We're exploring different possibilities. I think it is very important for consumers to have the full picture, a proper information. Again, there is not an easy discussions with the sector, who says that they would be way more, let's say, advanced in tracking and monitoring than other food suppliers, for example, canned food and so on. But I think we are really on the right track, and with the current technologies, we could definitely do that. And what I'm trying always to say to the sector, to the business, is that it's their competitive advantage, because here in the EU we are, you know, have the really, you know, very much advanced rules. Sustainability rules enhanced, and I really have deep respect to fishermen and women who go out there into the sea and fish and ensure us with this you know, healthy diet, and they comply with those rules. And I think this must be their competitive advantage when, you know, consumers come to stores and look which fish products to buy.
But at the moment, nothing is set in stone. It's still exploring possibilities.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Commissioner, thank you very much. You're halfway through your mandate.
Yeah.
In fact, probably more than halfway through your mandate, because the legislative process is so slow that, you know, anything you do, you'll be lucky to see within, you know, the next before you've come to the end of your term. I think during the course of our discussion, you've demonstrated your commitment in so many ways to the fishing industry and to rebuilding the health of our seas. You've got the political will to really give a push to people in your department and bring about some significant change, so that your name will be remembered as one of the people that really made a difference for the seas.
Absolutely.
And the fish.
Absolutely.
And the marine environment.
I have an excellent team, you know, who is supporting me, and I'm really thankful to them.
To be fair, they are. Sure. To be fair, I've worked with some of them over the years, and they are.
Exactly.
You've got some very good people here.
We'll do that. We'll do utmost till the very last days of our mandate, for sure.
And you're going to push to the very last moment to make a difference.
No, absolutely. all politicians, I think, they want to see their policies being implemented. So I hope we will be able to see some.
Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You've been listening to myself, that's Chris Davies, and the Commissioner for the Environment, Oceans and Fisheries, Virginijus Sinkevičius. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks.